Hello, everyone. Got some early birds in here. We'll get started here in a few moments. We're going to wait until probably about 1 or 2 after the start of the hour just to give people time to get logged in. But thanks for joining us this afternoon. Hello, everyone. Looks like we got a few more people in here. We'll get started here about 1 or 2 after the hour just to get people to get logged in and get started. Hello, everyone. Looks like we got a few more people that have logged in here. Welcome to today's session. We're going to get started here in about a minute or so, giving people some time to get logged in if they're coming in from other meetings or lunch. Thanks for joining us. All right, great. We will actually get things kicked off. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our Easing the Headache of Network Lifecycle Management webinar today. My name is Caitlin, and I am your virtual host for today's session. Just a few housekeeping notes before I pass it over to Justin and Dustin to kick things off. Today's webinar will be recorded and will be available on demand after the event. We will send out those details in the follow-up email so you can rewatch the demo or share with your colleagues. In addition to the on-demand recording, we'll also be sharing our Enterprise Network Refresh Playbook. And then for attending today's session live, we will be sending out an Uber Eats gift card. Expect this within 24 hours as a thank you for joining us. Finally, if you have any questions at any point during today's session, please submit them into the Q&A widget, and then we will address them all live at the end of the webinar. But for now, I will hand it over to Justin and Dustin to begin today's session.
Thanks, Caitlin. So I'll get it started off. Just a quick introduction and a level set of expectations on what we're going to cover today. So before I get into the agenda, I'm Dustin Grimeisen. I'm the GM of our network business unit. So anything from sales to architecture, consulting, all the way through service delivery for networking, it rolls up to me here at AHEAD. And we'll get into network lifecycle and some of the big transformations that we're helping our clients do. But before we do that, I'll turn it over to Justin for an intro.
And my name is Justin Formella. I'm the SVP of Software and Technology here at AHEAD. And I'll be going through a demo of our platform Hatch and how it applies to some of the problems it solves and some of the unique things it brings to the market on the lifecycle management side.
Yep. So very quickly, a set of expectations for today. So I'm going to spend maybe 10 minutes just kind of walking through a very short commercial on just what we're doing in digital transformation at AHEAD, and then how that applies to the network solutions that we're doing, and a lot of how we're tackling large-scale network lifecycle projects. And then I'm going to lead that into Justin's demo of the Hatch platform that we feel is a big differentiator in tackling some of these huge lifecycle and transformation projects. So before we get into that, though, I want to set the ground with some major digital transformation initiatives that we're working on at AHEAD. And not to go through all of these things in super depth, but as you scan across this list of major transformation solutions and projects that we're taking on behalf of our customers, almost everything that is in here requires a rethink of the foundation, right? Be it multi-cloud strategy, how does that impact networking and security? Maybe zero trust architecture on the security front, understanding what your assets look like so you can apply least privileges, or how do I build an automation strategy if I don't have a handle on the assets that are there today. So the main thing here to point out is that we're focused on digital transformation, but we also acknowledge that to do transformation does require a much stronger handle on lifecycle management and sort of how to deliver and continuously excel in the foundational layers, and how to manage the lifecycle of the assets that we have today, such that they can be in the best possible position to take on some of these transformation initiatives. In the networking world, we kind of look at our solutions in these 6 buckets. One is just strategy. How do we help you design network for your long-term use case, the applications that you're hosting, maybe the multi-cloud or hybrid cloud nature of the business? How do we take into account remote work and other things that are changing? But we want to sit and set a long-term vision and strategy for networking. When applied, that can be applied in data center networking, cloud networking, out at the enterprise, or in the OT spaces for the businesses that have that. And then 2 things that cross this entire perspective are the security of the network and how that network is automated. And so as we look across all of these major pillars of the networking business, almost all of them require the ability to handle large scale refreshes and large scale lifecycle management of networking assets, no matter where they are, from data center to the edge to the cloud. And how we do that here at AHEAD is we have kind of our enterprise lifecycle management process, where we set out that strategy with you, and then we get into the individual pillars around how do we, let's say it's a physical environment, how do we assess the facilities themselves? How do we build, standards and t-shirt sizes for those facilities, all the way through from how do you procure the equipment such that it's consistent and repeatable? How do you stage and put down, base level configurations to deploy that equipment, all the way through operational support. We look at this as an end-to-end life cycle, and you have to have a very strong perspective on how to handle this life cycle to be able to then transform on top of those networks. Now, most of what I'm showing here and most of what the demo that you're going to see is network related. But if you zoom out a little bit from networking, this lifecycle management philosophy and principle could apply to almost any of the major transformation solutions that we're trying to offer. It just so happens that networking tends to be one of the largest, most complex that our clients are struggling with a lot. Not because they can't manage their environment, but because the sprawl of the network over time, the scale that we're dealing with in the networking space is immense. And then when you add in things like over the last few years, more remote workers or more applications moving to cloud or multi-cloud, the network needs a rethink. And now more than ever, it needs to go through a major transformation. But what we're finding out is there's a roadblock to those kind of transformations. A lot of enterprises have a lack of asset visibility to understand what the assets are, what place in their life cycle they are. Are they still under support? Are they still possible to be supported from the manufacturer? We see a lot of complex custom configurations, no standardization across the enterprise. We see limited visibility into security vulnerabilities that might apply to the assets at scale. And then the general inability from a resource perspective to take on large scale refreshes at a national or global scale. And then if you add on top of that the things that I mentioned before about the rapidly changing landscape, it just increases the complexity of all of the above. If we don't have a good handle on our assets, we don't have a good handle on the life cycle of those assets, and then we're being asked to change our networks to account for multi-cloud, remote work, data and AI platforms, or just general application transformation. These challenges compound on each other. And so what we're going to show you today is what we think is a differentiated offering that we have for helping to get a handle on asset lifecycle and how to tackle some of these complexities that I have listed on the screen here, so that you can get yourselves into a better lifecycle management, get the foundations down to where they're automatic and you have full transparency on what that is, such that then you can go tackle the big transformation initiatives without worrying about the complexities of keeping the lights on. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Justin, to dig a little bit deeper on the Hatch itself.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. And what's interesting, so I know we're using the term life cycle, and I myself hate the term life cycle because it is such an overused and abused term in the industry. Everybody says it, and everybody, when it comes down to it, tends to be addressing a single point in the life cycle. What they're calling life cycle isn't actually comprehensive. Okay, what we're doing and what we bring with a Hatch platform that I'm going to show you is we're actually tackling life cycle in its truest sense, from conception to grave. We're going across the entire product, kind of the spectrum, from sourcing upstream in the supply chain to the support and in the field management. So what's neat about what we're doing with Hatch is there's a lot of data that you're going to see that is available in a variety of disparate sources. What we're doing is we're taking all those sources of data together, putting them and normalizing them in one kind of single view that you can look across device, across site, across manufacturer, and see that in one place. And I'm going to show you specifically how Cisco is a very big part of this, but you also may have compute and storage pieces of your ecosystem and how this addresses that as well. So when we talk about Hatch, there's 3 primary pillars I'm going to talk about. First is program management. I'm going to walk through some of the features around project management, product management, site management. Next is procurement. Procurement's more of the bread and the butter, the standard order management, logistics, inventory. And then get into the IT asset lifecycle management pillar, which has asset management, support, contract management, end of life management, updates, all of those features. And then lastly, we'll touch on a lot of the cross-platform interoperability and the security features that we have built in. So just want to touch on one thing before we go into the demo. Hatch is not positioned to compete with the CMDBs, procurement systems, service desks that are out there. Okay, the goal of the tool and the solution we're bringing here is to augment and orchestrate the activity between the platforms, is to bring data in, normalize it, and to push it out into whatever systems and downstream tools that you have as part of your overall IT service strategy. Hatch isn't something that a head charges for on a subscription or tax basis. This isn't a per user or per device type licensed piece of software. This is part of doing business with a head. So with that being said, I'm going to move on, and sure, we can switch over here and start the demo itself. All right. So we already talked about the 3 pillars. I'm going to start with the first pillar and start talking about program management. Program management within Hatch. First off, I'm going to go into when we approach any piece of activity, we have a lot of different ways that we can view data. And here's one advantage point, which we're taking activity that's project-based. And we're saying for this rollout, for this refresh, what's all the activity that I have for it. So here I can see all my orders, I can see all the assets, I can see all the shipments, kind of grouping all that activity into one place. The next area that's really interesting is we have functionality in which what we'll do is in any kind of like mass deployment, any deployment in which change control and kind of repeatability is important, we can roll out, we can productize something, and enforce change control. This comes in a lot. I've had worked with customers and worked with one customer that had a large 1,400 store rollout. And they had a situation that somewhere through the multi-year deployment, there were changes that were introduced. And when they went to roll out new applications, they were surprised at the fact that over half the stores, half the sites didn't match as they were expected. More and more IT teams want to deal with the environment almost as if it's no different than the cloud. They want to deal with an environment out there in which they can just push software and orchestrate and have a guarantee, have expectation that what's in the field matches what they expect. And what we have is a set of tools that'll allow us to kind of create a bill of materials for whatever a site can look like. This can be a mix of the storage, it can be a mix of the networking, the access points, the compute, all in one place. And then what we can do from that is we can enforce things like change control. We can enforce approval workflows in which members of your team, our team, have to be part of any approval, that there's nothing in the supply chain, nothing in the deployment that's going to go ahead and disrupt or change what you expect it to be without you having some level of involvement in that process. And I think that's kind of important, and this can be applied in a variety of different ways. And then you get downstream details such as what are all the potential variations you might have out there? What's the inventory? What's the supply chain lead times look like on the things that make up a repeatable deployment that you may have? And going into everything from lifecycle to compliance to even export on a global basis, and every piece of activity you've had tied to that deployment. And the last part of this kind of program management pillar, which is really neat, is site management. We go ahead and we'll set up every site that we're managing or helping you manage within the platform. And within each site, we can see and we can compartmentalize all of the activity. So I can see every asset that there's been for that site. I can see every shipment that might have been to that site, every order. I can see things such as details of wireless heat maps that may have come along with doing a site survey in relation to this site that we're managing for you, site assessments, and then down to the individual users who are at that site that might need notifications on when new equipment arrives, when equipment's been delivered. And we can customize those notifications and customize the information just those users see for the activity that's kind of compartmentalized with that site. The next pillar I'm going to jump into is procurement. And on the procurement side, first off, we start with order activity. When you're sourcing any equipment, so let's talk through a scenario in which we're sourcing switches, some core switches. We can see here we have all of the open order activity in one place. We can see everything from where is it going, what site it's tagged to, what is it that this is, what project it may be associated to, when is it estimated to ship, when was it ordered, and very, very granular details on what the actual status of that is. I can drill in here. I can see the details of this retail store deployment. I can see everything down to the sub-components that make up each line, how those configurations are set. And then I can even see if it's going through one of our integration centers. Now, one of the cool things is on top of the software, we also have multiple integration centers in which we can go through and centralize a lot of the activity, pre-configuration, staging, kitting, holding inventory for rapid deployment. And in this case, we can see that we have 2 units that are going through that are in a configuration stage right now. We can see the exact work center on an integration center floor that these devices are sitting in. Really neat. You can click in and I'll show you more about the asset details and the amount of verbose details that are available here, but I can even see details down to history and every individual person who may have touched that asset along the way before delivery.
So Justin, if I may, I want to jump in and kind of roll back to some of the comments on the challenging network lifecycle projects and some of what you just shared. For example, let's say we were doing a SD-WAN refresh for 500 locations across the country or across the globe. You as a client would be able to not only see the early statuses of when things are shipping, when they're landing, But what Justin showed there was, let's say we were going to centralize the build such that these are all going to land in a head facility. They're going to have, your customized code applied to them, your, code level revision standards applied, and any other custom integrations. You would be able to see which place in the status they are. They're going to get tagged all the way through. So that example that he showed was an asset that was currently in build phase. So you know that it's landed, it's being built, and you get full transparency as the deployment goes all the way until the last status is when it lands at the site. And so we do a lot of these large scale, network refreshes where having, many assets that are going to many different locations and being able to get almost like that Amazon-like status update on, where they are, how many stops they are away from the final destination. We feel that extra transparency is hugely important in these type of projects.
Thank you, Dustin. On something like an order object, a bill of materials, a site, we also have custom fields, and we've set this up to customize a variety of programs. I have some partners that will be using Jira or a procurement platform or whatever it is, where we can set up IDs and then focus on downstream how the integrations work, that we want to automate a workflow that goes from a procurement system and then pushing that data downstream to a CMDB like ServiceNow after the fact, and the data that needs to follow not only the orders, but the assets and the sites all the way through that process. And once the order ships, we have an entire system that gets into logistics analysis. Most of the time, you'll have tracking numbers that are being passed around. You have to manually go out and track and understand where something is, has it been delivered, communicate with potentially technicians in the field or whoever's going to actually do the final smart hands installation in the field. This takes all of that information and puts it in one place. We have integrations into 1,126 different carriers where every bit of activity that's in flight can be tracked and traced up to the minute. Now, that's pretty neat, but it's not something that you want to make a habit out of after happening to kind of like micromanage and police it. So the system goes a step further. What it'll actually do is it'll actually open up shipment exceptions if anything is damaged, delayed, lost, stuck in customs, and it'll assign it automatically to a logistics team member on our side. So we've had real world use cases of this where something even might be as simple as a delivery that got refused because it was a submerged dock and it was on a van. And that might happen in the morning. System will open up a ticket. We had a scenario just like that where at 10 a.m. had a refused shipment. By 3:30, it had been loaded on a proper truck, unloaded at that data center. It's still installed that day. And no involvement from anybody except for a team member on our side who got assigned to it, who worked directly with the carrier to resolve that and have that issue taken care of. Along with that, there's a host of analytics that come into play. There's details on all the tickets that may come along with that, and even detail on export. Once it comes down to moving beyond just the domestic market, we have a full suite that helps get into any possible market that's out there, and all the details on what needs to be done to ship into any possible region, even down to power requirements within the region, the shipping requirements and the certifications and regulatory conformity requirements that are needed to ship into pretty much any area across the globe. Lastly, in the procurement pillar, I want to touch on inventory. Within our warehouses, we have the ability to stock and kit a variety of different materials. And what you can see here is a situation in which we can have real-time visibility on what inventory is on hand, what inventory is incoming. We can set up things like reorder points. We can see details drilling into even what's inbound, when is it anticipated to arrive. And then in the cases in which there might be equipment that's coming in from an alternate source, we can track the inbound goods as well that might be merging up during a kitting or staging activity. And our algorithms use that schedule, the details on the inbound goods to schedule the outbound orders. Lastly, I want to touch on the lifecycle management and asset management capabilities. So this is really cool. And this is really where it gets into a large amount of details that we're able to pull from a variety of different partners and then take and push this information downstream to the subsequent systems you may have. Here's an index of all assets. I'm going to take an example of a Catalyst 9300. We can see here this is deployed to a retail store in Nashville. Drilling into that, I see details on any information we may either pull from a partner, we may manually apply, we may pull through automation or configuration that's happening within our integration center. See the details here on some initial configuration details of the switch. We have hardware snapshots that are coming in from another system. We have another piece of software called Forge, which is our image test and configuration environment. What that can do is that can take a lot of the activities that need to be done typically out in the field, smart hands, pound deployment, that we can centralize and almost kind of turn it a little bit into an assembly line where we're taking these configurations, applying them in a consistent manner, and then we're pulling, running any burn-in, pulling hardware snapshots on the detail of that asset, and making that information again available to push down into the CMDB once the device has been deployed. We can see any details on that automation I just talked about. We can see whether any scripts or routines have been run within our integration center or even through external routines that we can set up through Ansible or some kind of automation out in the field. And then we see attached log details as well that may be part of that operation. We can see details where we're pulling live. What are the support contract details on any piece of hardware? Here I can see on these Catalyst switches that there's 2 different support contracts and there's 2 years and 11 months remaining. This data is constantly being refreshed, and I'll show you how this data comes together in aggregate. I can see details on any vulnerabilities that this device may have. I can see details of any available software updates this device may have. I can see all of the available lifecycle milestones that come along with this for lifecycle management. And then also pull together what software was on the device at the point of deployment, as well as be able to take in and ingest any updates that are happening in the field that are being posted back through an API integration, and then match up and be able to give compliance reporting as far as if this is the targeted version for this device, understanding site by site what percentage of compliance you're within the platform itself. You can see some other details here, such as extending even beyond the switching and networking infrastructure. I can see here a compute object and the details that may be pulled on a piece of compute, same level of hardware snapshot details that come along with that. And again, pulling the other support contract details. So what's really cool about this is that this is one view where you don't have to go and look into multiple tools to be able to take and aggregate together the information about what's coming up for renewal, what are the vulnerabilities, what are the updates. One place, one single vision across your entire ecosystem. Lastly, we may have situations in which we're taking and devices are nested inside of other devices. Great way to look at this is the idea of a rack. And we can even see mappings and details of how these devices fit within another larger scale asset. And all this information I'm showing you is not only available on Hatch, but we have REST and GraphQL API endpoints. We have a ServiceNow integration. The idea is that this information can be pushed into the CMDB, and this can be seeded at the point of procurement instead of waiting until after the fact, having someone manually input data, doing device discovery. This just automates and streamlines that entire process. Looking at this data in aggregate, I can see all my support contracts. I can see devices that are expired. I can see contracts that are upcoming for expiration across different periods. I can look at that information on a very aggregate basis. I can look through every device and see what are the entitlements and when are those entitlements scheduled for expiration. Additionally, again, all of this information, a variety of integrations that we have. We go so far on the integration side. Love to use this example. I can even go into the Microsoft App Source and I can see hosted on Microsoft site and a head Hatch Microsoft Excel plugin. And what's neat is I can actually, it'll add to the top of Excel, a little import data button. And what that'll do is it'll allow you to pick different data sets and pull that data live right into an Excel spreadsheet. No waiting for somebody to send you a report, no downloading CSVs or Excel sheets and having to format them. Just again, part of the interoperability that's at our core, where we're pulling data in from multiple sources, normalizing it, making it available for you, and making it easy to push that out to a variety of different endpoints or applications. Users can be self-managed through the platform, different levels of control. Again, there's no tax on the number of users that can be part of this. They can have different levels of access. We can configure different levels of notifications across different platforms that can allow people to understand when something was delivered, when something hit a end of life date, when something is up for renewal, all managed through Hatch. Dustin, do you have anything you want to add on the demo before we move on to some Q&A?
Yeah, can you walk through the lifecycle pieces around support and things like that, and P-certs, and how we're kind of expanding those feature sets as well?
Absolutely. So, for example, I can see on a device-by-device basis. Go ahead, Dustin.
It's just me, but I'm still only seeing the Excel.
Sorry.
There you
We
go.
didn't switch tabs there. So we can see on a life cycle basis the individual details. And what's really neat is I can then go ahead and actually see that information in aggregate as well across my different productized records, across different components, and understand how lifecycle plays in, even assigning risk scores to individual parts of the overall equipment that we're sourcing and deploying for you. Additionally, jumping back into the asset, I know, Dustin, you want to touch on, and I know we breezed through it, but when we're talking P-certs, the actual details on vulnerabilities, it's like specific to the software plus the device on an individual device-by-device basis, and understanding what those vulnerabilities are.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure that we hit it a little bit more, because in the network lifecycle use case, these become pretty important pieces to building that overall strategy. If we're looking at thousands of, say, Cisco access points and switches, you're never going to get a clean break of I can replace all thousands at one time. So you have to start making decisions around categorizing the ones that are end of support life, end of sale life. Certainly vulnerability is a separate issue to tackle, but as we're building out the overall life cycle, having this information at your fingertips on the sort of the status and the state of each of these equipments, and then we roll that up into kind of a life cycle refresh program, it's just added data that we are going to bring in that historically is usually some kind of an assessment or kind of a long-running process to figure that out. And I also think like showing the vulnerabilities is another example of what Justin said earlier, which is Hatch is not designed to replace your vulnerability scan tools and other things like that, but it's an additional place to see this data and then see it connected to the rest of your infrastructure. And so you can pull up these vulnerabilities, or you could pull up the lifecycle information that Justin showed before, but it's also going to say these are the products or the fixed builds that are associated. So it's just another layer of visibility that you have into the environment. It's not necessarily designed to replace the tools that that is their niche specialty. It's trying to give you a centralized pane of glass for this information.
And my apologies, I wasn't sharing the right tab before when I was showing the user management, the ability to add as many users as you want, set different permission levels, and customize the notifications across all of those different type events.
Yeah, and you might as well go into that, show that a little bit more, because I do know that one of the Q&A questions was around user management, role-based access. What are the different settings you can have here?
Yeah. Here, do we want to go through what's that specific question so I make sure I answer it exactly?
Caitlin, you may have it in front of you.
Yeah. One person asked, would the access be role-based?
So the access is role-based from the level of what somebody can do, what they can, whether it's view only, whether they can get in, and there are different levels of what they can do. We are in the process of adding role-based authentication, in which you'll be able to kind of set up the different personas and restrict that area by area, and that is on our roadmap.
Okay, cool. Anything else you want to touch on there? Or do you want me to start going into some?
No, let's start going through some of the questions.
Okay, cool. Let me pull them up here. By the way, anyone, if you have questions, feel free to submit them into the Q&A widget, and then we'll pull them into our queue. But the next one I have, there's a few of these. Is this multi-vendor supported? And then also, you've shown a lot of Cisco networking integrations. Does Hatch have the ability to get data from other vendors?
So it does, and that list of vendors continues to grow every month. Right now, the primary two partners that are represented with like the verbose details are centralized around Cisco and Dell. We have a variety of other partners who are on our roadmap for Q1. For example, Pure will be added shortly. I like to show this too. Like, here's an example of a Dell shipment for some compute, and even details that go into, as you can see here, where is it upstream? What factory is it sitting at? When's the estimated delivery date?
And I would just add to that too. Basically any solution that's procured through us, we can get into the Hatch platform. There are some vendors like Cisco that we have very deep upstream integrations with, that we can see into the supply side all the way through, ordering, automatic shipment status updates and those kind of things. We're also working very closely with Cisco on ongoing integrations, right? So say pulling information out of CX Cloud around licensing and support status. Not every vendor is going to have that level of depth like what we're building with Cisco, but the platform is essentially it's a data visibility platform. So if we can get it in there at time of procurement or through a native integration, we can support it.
And Dustin's exactly right. There is today at the point of procurement, we will add support contract details for a variety of different devices, even manufacturers that may not have the ability to provide that information in electronic format. We still see that information and give you that level of visibility.
Got another one here. How do we add existing inventory or sites? At what point would I license purchase need to occur?
So Hatch is available again. This isn't a taxed platform. This is something that's available for anything, any activity you're doing with a head. For past assets or any assets that you may have deployed, we can add those assets to the platform, make the calls to the partners, pull in the same data, give the same level of experience. We do charge for adding assets that weren't part of us initially, but that is something that we support and can do asset loads for.
Yeah, and I think there was and Caitlin, you may see this, but there was another question, at least in the chat, that was very similar. What if I have existing suppliers for certain things? Is it necessary to transact with a head to do business? I would just say that's the easiest way to get onto the Hatch platform, because we are trying to utilize Hatch as a value add for doing that business through us, right? Which is why we're not charging for onboarding of solutions that go through us. They don't have to go through our integration facility, but purchase through us. Hatch is included as a value add. There are things, as Justin mentioned, that we would charge for based on a services basis, pulling in custom information and doing those kind of things. But we're open to all of that. But obviously the preference is that, we would do the business with a head, because this is the platform that we're providing essentially to give you full transparency of the business that you're doing with us. However, if you have other providers, this happens all the time where there's like we can do wireless surveys and assessments as an example, but there are many cases where our clients already have established partners who do that within regions. We can incorporate that data and upload those attachments as part of the sites or assets, however is necessary. We can take in that kind of information relatively easily.
Cool.
I think another.
Yeah, we got one. Does Hatch have the ability to maintain status of non-hardware assets, for example, public cloud instances?
So it does not yet. That is on our 2024 roadmap. There is right now, Hatch is focused on the devices themselves, the Cisco, the networking devices, the compute devices, the storage devices that are managed in a multitude of different environments.
Okay. And someone wants to know if a circuit can be considered an asset.
A circuit can be considered an asset. Anything that's serialized. Now, there wouldn't be any additional information that we'd be pulling, as we don't have any integrations with any of the circuit providers, but we can take circuits and we could assign those to given sites and attach, there's a key value store that's attached to every asset, and attach those details on the circuit to the site itself.
Okay. We got two here around ServiceNow. The first one being, if I'm already using ServiceNow for CMDB, does Hatch replace that functionality? And then in the chat, someone asked, can we get an update regarding the integration with ServiceNow and how these capabilities will look like? The directional data feed versus bidirectional.
I am a big fan and advocate of ServiceNow. There's nothing here that in my estimation is designed to replace ServiceNow. It's designed to augment it. The opportunity is there's a lot of frustration and struggle sometimes on managing the inbound goods, where things are deployed, and that process, and keeping that up to date in ServiceNow. There's a variety of different tools that can help kind of fill that in, but a lot of them sometimes can leave a bit of noise and distort or blur what I'm going to consider the reality of the ground truth. And what's neat about this is all this information that we're taking, bringing in, normalizing. What we have through our ServiceNow integration is the ability to push and seed your CI record and your device record and associate it with a site in ServiceNow, so that information is there from the point of procurement.
Awesome. And then we got another one here. Is Hatch modularized so you can a la carte it for features you don't need?
It isn't, but there's no, the idea is this is something that it isn't taxed. It's not like we charge more for this feature or that feature. We have a full suite of capabilities here, from kind of that conception to grave, and we encourage everyone to use them where they make sense. But there's no requirement to use Section A or Section B that's part of this tool.
Yeah, and for that matter, we actually have some clients who utilize Hatch's API integrations to pull information that Hatch has into some other customized platform, and that's their main use, right? So some of the other features that Justin showed are obviously value adds of the platform, but you're flexible to use it either natively as it is, or even utilize its APIs to integrate with other processes within the enterprise.
Well, one of my favorite examples of that is we have one customer, Netflix, and what they did is they built a system called Hatchet, and Hatchet uses the APIs in Hatch to kind of orchestrate the entire process through code. So they treat us basically as if we were another software process in which they can orchestrate the procurement, the deployment, and the ingestion of the details into their system all automatically.
All right, we have another one here. Is there integration with Avanti platform? Does VM Impact consider internal configurations and other mitigating factors?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Justin.
Okay.
So there's no native integrations today with like Ivanti or Qualys or anything like that. The vulnerability management piece that Justin showed before is more from the manufacturing side of the equation now. Like if Cisco P-certs apply to particular equipment, it doesn't today do anything like crossover analysis where you would say this is a high-risk asset versus the high-risk vulnerability, those kind of things. It's not intended to replace your vulnerability management platforms. It's just intended to be another place to view, especially the asset-related vulnerabilities. You would still want to correlate that with your existing systems. It can be integrated though relatively easily and customized, by customer, because most of these systems are API driven on both ends. So there are potential integrations where you can use asset information in Hatch to apply context to your vulnerabilities in a platform like Ivanti. So the integrations don't exist natively as in we created them, but they can be created by our clients.
All right, great. And then I think we have one more here, unless people want to submit a few with the few remaining minutes we have left. You kind of already touched on it, but how is the platform licensed and what's the monthly cost?
There isn't a monthly cost. We have, there may be some cost associated to onboarding, setting up, depending on if you want federated or different authentication methods, training that kind of comes up front. But from a reoccurring basis, this isn't something that we're taxing. This is a, part of doing business with a head. I look at this very similar to, when I work with Amazon, Amazon has a suite of software that is just part of the value that Amazon provides. When I use Uber, I'm not paying separately for the software. It's part of the service of me getting from point A to point B. And the idea here is, as we help you solve problems in your overall IT delivery and management process, this is a tool that helps us do that more effectively than anybody else.
Cool. You guys have any other parting words before I close this out here? It looks like we're done with questions in the Q&A.
I think there was one last question that popped in, or we
covered it.
Covered it? Okay.
Yeah, that one's covered.
Yeah, so I guess I can wrap us up here. First of all, I appreciate everyone joining and listening in. I'll just kind of go back to what I said at the beginning. Like we're trying to help drive a lot of digital transformation for our customers, and what we're finding out there is just getting a good, strong handle on the foundation and the life cycle of those foundational elements is inhibiting transformation, right? It's making a lot of the big transformation projects not get off the ground. And so what we're trying to do with the Hatch platform is essentially open up the full transparency to what's there, and then help you get a big handle on how to manage those assets, how to lifecycle them, how to bring them in, retire them out. And we feel like by making the foundational elements truly sort of just standard operating procedure, then it's going to open up so much more of our attention span towards those transformation aspects. It's going to give us a much more stable environment to be able to take on big transformation aspects. So I just didn't want to, forget to remind, that's the ultimate goal here, is we want to make the management of this, massive asset lifecycle very easy on you. And by doing so, open up those cycles to do the truly differentiated things.
I want to do it in a way in which we're providing total transparency, and doing it in a way in which information is available to flow and not trapped in any one place, that we're able to offer that and be able to provide that from system to system.
Great. Well, thank you both, Dustin and Justin, and everyone for joining us today. I just want to give a thank you as well to Cisco for sponsoring. And then as a reminder, we'll be sending out the on-demand recording for this session, as well as our Enterprise Network Refresh Playbook. Say that 10 times fast, in the email follow-up. But we hope to see you at our next event, and have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.